what we're doing is making sure that we have enough information about this project for our state agencies to make good decisions about permitting, about funding, about licensing, and knowing full well what those environmental impacts are associated with the project, knowing what alternatives the proponent has looked at to mitigate those impacts, knowing what mitigation measures specifically the proponent is proposing to avoid, minimize, and mitigate those measures. We're looking at this project, and it's actually an expanded environmental notification form because it exceeds certain thresholds that are laid out in our regulations, and it requires state agency permits. The project may get funding, actually state funding, which is one issue we look at. Any project that requires some kind of state agency action, whether it's licensing, funding, or permitting, and exceeds the thresholds laid out in our regulations, that's what brings you into the state process. So if your project only requires local approvals, we don't normally look at that type of project. So those are the two things. And this project in particular, generally what we're looking at is an ENF, and the Secretary is making a decision about whether or not additional environmental review is warranted in the form of an environmental impact report or an EIR. With this project, it actually trips what's called a mandatory EIR threshold. So we know that there will be an environmental impact report. There's no question about that. It exceeds the mandatory EIR threshold. And what we're looking at today is not whether or not to require one, but what should be in the scope for that report. So that's really the purpose of the scoping session today. So we don't have to talk about whether or not to require one. It takes one issue off the table for this project. So the project requires state agency. It actually includes state agency funding. Will require permits from Mass Highway and from Mass DEP, including an access permit. It may require a Water Management Act authorization from DEP, new source approval, and potentially a groundwater discharge permit from DEP. And in addition, it trips our thresholds for land alteration because there'll be more than 50 acres of land alteration. And it trips our thresholds for transportation because there'll be more than 3,000 trips a day and more than 1,000 parking spaces. So that's what brought the project in.
Contained within the document is a full traffic study, so that's why one of the reasons why the document is so thick. It's very comprehensive, and we need to provide enough information up front so that you're able to provide comments on the document, as well as the state agencies, to be able to look at all of the analyses that we've done to demonstrate that the project can be accommodated, that there's sufficient infrastructure out there, and that we're making any improvements that are necessary to maintain the safety of the motoring public on the roadway, so that we're not creating a detrimental impact when we're done with the project. The traffic study, in terms of what we evaluated, looked at the primary access points in the project. So it encompassed the Long Pond Road corridor stretching from Jordan Road in the north to the Clark Road, Long Pond Road intersection in the south, and it included the Route 3 Clark Road interchange as well. We also looked at the state highway system, because the majority of our traffic we're expecting is going to come from the state highway, be oriented to the north and south, about 80% of the traffic. So we need to make sure that we can safely get that traffic through the interchange, and that as the traffic gets onto the highway, that as it's merging and weaving, either getting on or getting off the highway, that we're not creating congestion on the highway itself. So we've geared some improvements to that also. Access into the project is shown, this is Route 3 here, here's Clark Road, so we've got our access road coming into the project. 80% of our traffic is going to go through this interchange area. So the interchange was a focus of where we found that we need to make some improvements to accommodate the additional traffic from the project. There's 10 access alternatives. All of those access alternatives will improve operations in the interchange. All of them will provide safe and efficient access into the project. And the reason there's 10 alternatives is to solicit comment from the state agencies as well as from yourselves. So we want to make sure that we're providing at least enough information so that you can make some decisions or provide informed comments.
As Steve mentioned, there will be a sewer extension that runs from the site up north to the Camelot Drive wastewater treatment plant, and that has been cited to minimize disturbance to natural areas to the extent possible, and I think that we've achieved that by running long crosswinds here along the edge, and then through between two fields there in Forges Field, and after that it's really through roads up to Camelot Drive. And there will be a traffic management plan put in place to make sure that people have, can maintain their access to their homes. as well as the sewer extension, that corridor will also be used to install a water reuse line. So by putting utilities all together in that one corridor, that's a way to minimize the impacts of basically what our construction impacts.